I'm honored that you guys are all here. This is Lessons from the Support Desk. We're going to talk about what I think developers need to understand from the perspective of a support team or a support organization. But first off, who am I and why am I here? My name is D Macbeth. I am the Senior Director of Support at Crunchy Data. And I'm here because of that guy, Joe Conway, who sat down to interview me in 2017 and said, Evan, I just don't want to have to worry about support anymore. And I'm really proud to say he doesn't have to worry about support anymore. So I think that's worked pretty well. I'm also here because of someone who couldn't be here today, David Steele. He's in Australia. He's the guy who referred me. I put his name up there because you guys might run into him at a conference. If you want an opening question to ask David Steele, give you an excuse to talk to David Steele, ask him how he met Evan Macbeth. There's a story there. We've been friends for, gosh, 25 years. Before that, I did support for open source software at a company called Senior Nomine Associates. I worked on something called OpenAFS, which is why I reacted the way I did about Carnegie Mellon and Pittsburgh. It was the Andrew file system. It's a distributed file system. It kind of led me into where I am today. I also did some stuff with Linux on Z. So if anyone's had any experience with that, my former company, Senior Nomine Associates, was really critical to that product and project. And I've been doing telecom for 30 years in one fashion or another. My whole career started in 1994 as an intern at AT&T with the GSDN group. And I was really happy yesterday to attend Takeda's presentation from NTT. I don't know if anyone else was in the room for that one, but it warmed my heart to 30 years later still be working with NTT in some fashion. So that was kind of neat. The last thing I'm going to ask, can anyone guess the date that this photo was taken? Anyone? I'll give you a hint. What's on my shoulder? It's a towel. Towel Day, May 25th. That's right. So that's why I put it up there. Big Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to open with my perspective. And again, this is all just my perspective. I'm not saying I'm right about things. I'm saying this is my experience of things with what is development and what is support and how do they interact. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the use cases I've experienced. We're going to talk a little bit about documentation and why that's important. We're going to talk about upgrades. We're going to talk about versions. We'll talk about downtime. We'll talk about recovery. And we're going to close by talking about the most important thing, users. Also, Karen, that's you. So this is probably the most important concept I want every developer of software to understand. And that is the difference between surface area and volume. This seems like pretty basic stuff, I know, but trust me. Oh, gosh darn it, why'd you do that? There we go. When you develop code, when you write software, when you do a release, you are expanding the surface area of the world of things you have to care about and be aware of, right? Every new release, every new code patch, every new feature expands that surface area of Postgres, of our Postgres world, of our Postgres community. It makes the area larger, and all you developers, every developer is responsible for an ever-expanding area on that surface. It's hard, I know. Can we even comprehend the size of the surface area inside Tom Lane's brain? Probably not. But your support organization is responsible for the volume. Now think about that. Think about how much bigger that is. Think about how much harder that is. Because we don't care about the latest release. We don't care about the feature you're going out now. Our customers care about everything all the way down and all the history therein. And therein lies the single biggest lesson I want all of you to take away and every developer of this conference to take away about the support experience. Even making code better increases the work that your support team has to do. So I attended Thomas Monroe's talk yesterday. It was awesome. It was fantastic. And I pulled a line from that, and that just rang out to me. We only want to make things better, not worse. And that's true of everyone in this room. It's true of everyone at this conference. The goal is to make things better. And I admire that. It works, it's great, it's superior. And when you make things better, what do? You bump your version number, right? There's a new release out in the world, 15.11. Great. It's different from 15.10, right? Okay. But how do your customers experience that? How does your support team experience that? Well, your support team has to support all of your customers who are applying that fix, right? Okay, all right, great. But they also have to support all your customers who aren't applying that fix. So you've now doubled the complexity of stuff they have to support by doing a release and making things better. I'm not saying don't do releases. I'm not saying don't make things better. But this is a really important thing to understand about why your support professionals sometimes get cranky. Even reducing code complexity increases the support work that needs to be done. Because now you go from something that was less complex, more complex to less complex. But what changed? The second law of thermodynamics remains undefeated. Entropy wins. Thank you. I hope you've all enjoyed my talk today. You want some more lessons? More lessons? Okay. This is the heat death of the universe, just for the record. That's why that's up there. Please keep your users, your support engineers, and your technical account managers in mind when you're doing coding. Because fundamentally, there is literally nothing you can do to make their jobs less work. You can make their jobs easier, but you can't make their jobs less work. So a feature or a fix is put out into the world. That's fundamentally what we're all here to do. When you are writing code, when you are doing a feature, when you are applying a fix, the utopian case that you have in mind in writing that is really, really important. Okay? Every single one of us, whether we realize it or not, has a utopian case in our heads when we're designing something, when we're writing something, when we're coding something. And understanding that utopian case is really critical for your support organization and for your customers. And that means detailing your assumptions. Because all problems really can be root caused to a variance from an assumed state. Why did you do it that way? Why did you assume I wouldn't do it that way? There's always some kind of variance from an assumed state that is at the core of problems and most trouble tickets. Also, if you detail your assumptions, it makes problem replication way easier for your support team. So at a bare minimum, when you are writing code and releasing features and things like that, please, please, please tell your support organization, please tell your users what is the platform this was written on or about, and what version is it for? Did you write in AIX? Did you test it on Red Hat? Did you test it on Debian? Any of these environment variables. And this is fascinating to me. This is the #1 thing your support team wants. I promise. I promise. Every ticket should come in with this information. I have been at a lot of presentations here, seen an incredibly large number of really cool technical ideas. I have no idea what any of them was written on or for. No presentation yet has said, well, I did this on Red Hat 8.6, Postgres 14.2. Really neat ideas are only ideas unless you tell me what they're on. Use cases are important, and by use cases, I mean examples. Give me examples, and give us examples, and give your users examples. All examples are good examples, with a little bit of context added to them. And I got some confused. Really? Examples? Yes, 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 yes. Because fundamentally, your users aren't going to read your docs, but they are going to try to run your examples. And I promise you, you guys have examples out there right now that don't run. I promise you. Because it's old docs that haven't been updated for Postgres 16 or for Red Hat 8. How many folks out there have documents out there for features that you're running that are assuming Red Hat 6 still? Give me examples. Lots of examples, because that's what they're going to go to first. And make sure your examples actually run. Because your users don't read your documentation. I know we want them to. Believe me, I do support. I really, really want them to. Your users don't read your documentation, but your support team does. So what's the audience for your documentation? It's your users, but really, it's going to be your support team. Because the dirty secret of support is most of the time, it's the customers paying your support team to read the docs for them. Because the answer is in there 90% of the time. And the Postgres docs are outstanding. Okay, let me be upfront here. I've done a lot of work in support. I've done a lot of work in different projects. The Postgres docs are great. I am really impressed by what is in there and the answers that are in there. I joined this thing and had no idea what xlog and wall was in 2017. I popped over to the Postgres docs and I read that entry, and I'll be damned if I didn't understand it after reading that entry. It was amazing. But one of the things you should do is have your support team read your docs before you do a release. Build in the time. Let them do it. And push them on it. If they say, oh yeah, it looks fine, yeah, they didn't read it, push them. Because every organization is going to use docs differently. Every support team is going to use docs differently. And your users will use your docs the way your support team does. Because they're going to learn how to use your docs from opening tickets with your support team. So that interaction is really, really important. Real quick aside about chat docs, which is an emerging thing. I'm an old man and don't like it. And here's why. Hallucination's a thing. Answers can be wrong. But I do think it's a great way to find things. So what I prefer is in scenarios where you got something like chat docs emerging, find out where the answer that the chat docs is coming from originated, and then go read the source. Go read the source docs, go read the source material. This is a great shortcut for your support teams, especially as things that volume inside the sphere gets bigger. It can be hard to know where to look. Chat docs is a great way to find out where to look, but they should go read the actual docs instead of relying on the answer from chat. No one, there's little giggles, I get it. No one upgrades. No one upgrades, guys. No one upgrades. It's not a thing. March 2024. Postgres site I work with and have worked with for many, many, many years. Over half, well, about a little less than half of all their servers were running Postgres 11 or below. 6 of them were running 9.6 or below. I use that word running advisedly, okay? Active in production. I know we have really great stuff in Postgres 17 coming. I really do. I know that Postgres 16 has a lot of really cool stuff in it. Your support team has to deal with customers who could care less because they want their 9.6 to work. Anyone see this headline? Yugabyte, pretty big deal company. Pretty major thing out there in the world, right? May 22, a week ago, they announced they were moving off of a deprecated version of Postgres that hasn't seen an update since last year. No one upgrades. And finally, let's talk about a trouble ticket I got in January. So I'm sorry, I did not necessarily do the best job. Let me see if I can fix this. Can you guys read that? Let me read it for you. The password you entered is too long. Windows NT will not accept a user password that is longer than 14 characters. January of this year. Okay, why am I showing you all this stuff? Because no one upgrades. And that's really important for developers to understand. We all want the cool new thing. We want the new feature, we want the fix. The reality is, most of the support work your team is going to have to deal with isn't because of your new features. And you guys, developers, do a great job with new features, a great job with new releases. It's super great. But that isn't what's keeping your support team up at night. That isn't what's keeping your users up at night. This old stuff is. So versions matter a lot. What does latest mean? Be really clear about that. Provide a software bill of materials. Give me the dependency list. Will this work with Python 2? Will this work with Python 3? Right? There's all kinds of these things that matter a lot. Backwards compatibility is critical. And testing that it works backwards is critical. Give me a matrix. Give me a chart that says, okay, this release has been tested on these versions and validated on these versions. And in the world we are living in today with continual releases and life cycles that have shrunk to less than a year, this couldn't be more important. Okay? How many folks here know what the current release of Kubernetes is? Anybody? Okay. Can anybody tell me what the most recent deprecated release of Kubernetes is? Anybody? How many in this room actually think that the version of Kubernetes that's currently active doesn't matter for your code? Because it does. What about Ansible? Anybody have any idea what version of Ansible is current? 2.17. There you go. Outstanding. Great. What's the significant change in 2.17? So no longer supports Python 2. That might be important.
Actually, I think it has a minimum free version now.
Yes, that's correct. So that's kind of important, right? So do that platform validation. Test the stuff. Test the stuff on the older stuff. And give us roadmaps. Dear God, there was an announcement from the Ansible guys today, or earlier this week. It was 5 pages of announcements about changes that are coming to the project. And you read the whole thing and it tells you nothing. Absolutely nothing about what they're going to do. Postgres, on the other hand, we got Postgres 17 beta release notes available for public review. Open source wins. Reasons I love it, reasons I'll always be there for it. Give me clear roadmaps. Give your support team clear roadmaps. Let us know where things are going. That way we can tell customers when we're interacting with them what to expect when they need to upgrade. Because eventually, everyone upgrades. Just not in the time frame you expect. Because sometimes the testing and validation requirements of your customer organizations extend beyond a release cycle. All right? There are many mission-critical sites that require software validation cycles of 6 months. A Postgres release cycle is 3 months. So is it possible for that organization to take every minor release? No. Do we expect that organization to take every minor release because we fixed things? Yes. See the conflict? So it's really, really, really important to document and talk about what changed and why. especially compatibility deprecations and assumptions. If you are dropping support for something, that needs to be bold and it needs to be at the top of the release notes. No longer functioning with Python 2? Great, tell me that. No longer functioning with Red Hat 6? Great, tell me that. Don't assume that just because Red Hat 6 is now end of life, you no longer have to announce that you no longer support it. No, you should announce that you no longer support it in your release notes. Look at what happened to Yugabyte. One of the biggest things that has changed in Postgres in my career here is this 10 release window that's been introduced. It's great, it's needed, it's making the code better, it's making the software better. No argument. It is going to create an extraordinarily large amount of work for your support teams because you can no longer guarantee universal backwards compatibility. I have customers I am in calls with every month who are running versions of Postgres that are at risk of running up against that lower bound. It is creating incentives for them to upgrade, which is really tremendous. But it's also creating a lot of anxiety for them. However, the community at Postgres let me know this was coming and has made it really, really clear in the release notes and in the emails that this is the case. It's great. Let us know. Because release notes are your support team's best friend. When in doubt, read the release notes. When in doubt, expect your support team's going to read the release notes. When in doubt, put it in the release notes. Let us know what's changed. Be specific. Again, really love what Postgres does here. Compliments to everybody who has ever contributed to a Postgres release's release notes. I might be one of the few people in the community who reads them cover to cover every time because I do support for a living and have for a long time. They're great. Keep it up. But take the lesson from Postgres for your own projects. You got this tool you're building, you got this solution you're developing, make your release notes as detailed and as high quality as the Postgres project's release notes, and your support team will be really happy. Because everyone hates downtime. Show of hands, how many people have been in a meeting with a customer where the customer said, we need zero downtime? Yeah. Show of hands, how many people believe that there's such a thing as zero downtime? As I like to say to our customers when we're on calls, you either have, there's no such thing as zero downtime. You either have planned downtime or you have unplanned downtime. And if your downtime is unplanned, your users will be unhappy. So always, always, always have at least some planned downtime. Why am I talking about this to a developers conference? Because users are not patient. They never upgrade, but they're not patient. This dichotomy is hard. It's the job of your support team to manage it. So set and manage the expectations for your users. We have lots of you guys were at that Postgres 17 talk this morning, a lot of you, right? I was not. I was here, I was listening to a really, really nice talk about replication. But I guarantee, using my mental powers of clairvoyance, that in that talk, they said nothing about how long it is going to take to complete a successful upgrade from Postgres 16 to Postgres 17. Can you guys think of a customer site where it is okay to have no idea how long an upgrade is going to take? You'll say to me, Evan, we can't know that. It depends on so many variables. Well, you're right. But if you document your assumptions and say, well, I have a 100 gigabyte database here. It's running on Red Hat 8.9, and I'm going from Postgres 14 to Postgres 16. Well, now I've got something, building block I can use to start to think about how long an upgrade is going to take. And that's important. That is usable information for your customers and your support team. Backwards compatibility is super critical. I've mentioned this before, but please, please, please test. Please test. You know, a lot of times when you do an upgrade test, you're just going to go from the immediately previous version to the next version. That's not enough. Most of your customers are not running the immediately previous version. They're running some random version 6 or 7 versions back. So the more backwards compatibility you can test, the better off your support team's going to be, the better off your customers are going to be. And this is a lot of work. And I don't know where the trade-off is. Every organization has to figure it out differently. But at a minimum, there's 5 currently maintained versions of Postgres. You should test an upgrade from every major version to the latest, at a minimum. And document those results.
Because they don't all work.
Correct.
As Postgres 12 to 15 will not work PG upgrade.
Correct.
For me because of the polymorphic function changes.
And don't get me started on what happened when Red Hat 6 dropped and OIDC changes, which we still get.
And also Postgres 14 dropped the older protocols which were in use in our ODBC connections.
And testing would show all of this stuff. So one of the great things about Postgres, one of the things that really, really matters is to have multiple success paths when it comes to upgrades and downtime. And I really like this about Postgres, right? There are so many ways to recover a Postgres cluster. There are a lot of different ways to pull off a successful upgrade. So if you have only one correct and successful way of doing something that is upgrade related, that is not sufficient. You want to have multiple ways a customer can successfully complete that upgrade. Make it easy. Rolling upgrades are the latest thing. We can talk about that afterwards if you really want to. Everyone here knows what that is. Let's talk about recovery. Backups and restores are really, really important. Okay? Why am I talking to developers about backups and restores? Because I want you to try it. Seriously. You've built a new code. You've built a new fix. You've implemented a new feature. The feature works. Super great. Yay. Okay, now back up the system and try a recovery of that system with your new code or your new feature in it. Oh, it couldn't possibly break backup and recovery. You sure? Maybe recovery takes a lot longer now. Something to think about. Because fundamentally, at the end of the day, the tool in the toolbox that will save everyone's bacon is being able to restore from a backup. And as a developer, that is the thing you cannot mess with and break. Backups and restores have to continue to work. Please put this in your testing list. Please have your support team practice it and test it. If your support team is not doing restores from backups all the time, that's a problem. That should be part of their standard tool set. And practice it, practice it, practice it. It needs to be like muscle memory. Because that is how you're going to save a system that is otherwise completely screwed. Practice it, please. And have your support team practice it. Have your customers practice it. Yes, even developers. Doesn't make your restores take longer. I'm going to go back. Any questions about this? This is, I'm a little passionate about this. Okay. Yeah.
I did have a question on earlier.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you mentioned that people want 6 months to qualify our point releases. And the way we'd like people to think about them is like Microsoft Patch Tuesday things. Like, yeah, you can delay 6 months if you want, but we think most people shouldn't. Is there a way that, do they also take 6 months to qualify every Microsoft hotfix? Or
did you see the NT ticket? Yes, some sites do. The difference between Microsoft and Postgres is what? No. Proprietary versus open source. Microsoft says that, but I guarantee you that they have a lot of customers with private contracts that give those customers certain rights to do things in certain ways or certain backwards compatibility. We have no visibility into any of that. We're open, right? So Microsoft is always going to tell us, private organizations that are not open source are always going to tell us the best case scenario for them.
So we have to go through validation because it's a federal requirement for us. And so because Postgres is not a validated system, we are required to validate it. And we're required to validate all the applications we write that are based on Postgres. So upgrades take a long time because you have to validate Postgres and you have to validate all the applications that you have written that use Postgres. And all those validations have to be validated on the new version before your production systems can be upgraded.
So all of this, yes, which goes to Lest, if I can remember which presentation it was yesterday, and I apologize to the presenter for not remembering. It might have been Thomas's. Don't certify your applications on a point release. please certify them on the major release and let your customers just validate.
That was Karen's talk?
Was it your talk?
I did talk about that.
I'm sorry, Karen. I apologize. Karen's the best. Yeah.
Other thing is people don't really put automation behind some of this stuff, and they really should. So that a lot of reason why I find that people aren't doing any of this is because they haven't taken the time to automate it. They don't have the person power to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We do.
Well, I mean, some shops do, but I think there's more
But when you add automation, what are you doing?
saving time.
And making the surface area bigger. It's another thing that can break, right?
Oh, of course, but I mean, you're trying to save time to focus on more high value.
Sure.
Rather than having someone sit there and upgrade stuff all day long.
Oh, absolutely. Automation is super duper important with that, and there's lots of really, really good ways to automate it. But from a lessons from the support desk perspective, just recognize that that is a thing that can go wrong, so make sure you're testing it and validating it as much as you test and validate everything else.
And the backup and restore is also very important too, because every 3 months we have to do a burn down scenario.
Yep.
Where our facility burns to the ground and we have to restore onto blank hardware everything. See,
that's the right way to do that, because a lot of disaster recovery tests I see are just failover tests, and you got to do the restore. So, but this is a great conversation.
That's why some of my frustrations with PG dump all and PG dump is there is a missing gap of the like the database level grants are not backed up. And so we have special backup code that backs up those to restore.
All are great lessons, but I do want to, if it's okay, draw us back to the most important audience member who's not in the room. Well, there are probably some here. Postgres users. Postgres users. So I think everyone can guess what's about to show up on screen. Hopefully it's not a surprise to anyone. It's the Edward Tufte quote. There are only two industries that refer to their customers as users: illegal drugs and software. I put this up on screen because it's really, really important, because I think this is somewhat reflective of a developer perspective, right? There is a perspective of the user as a pure taker, a pure consumer. I think that open source does a better job than proprietary in involving the users in the actual interaction about the software, but this is important. Now, open source users are a little different from general users. Why is there a bag of goldfish on the screen? Well, you know the old saying about goldfish, right? They have no memory. They remember nothing. And that's really important. One of the things that is very frustrating for support teams, but is very, very true, is that your customers aren't going to learn things. They're not going to remember things. Not because they're bad people, but because there's turnover. It's not going to be the same users all the time. And that institutional memory will get lost all the time. And so it's really important to remember they're not going to necessarily know what they knew before. But why did I put a bag of goldfish in here and not a real goldfish? It's because there is a degree to which they are all the same and interchangeable. Because when they forget things, they return to a state of commonality. And the other thing I want you to remember, and the reason I put this up here in terms of users for open source, is that you are a user too. Because every single person in this room uses Postgres, right? So you do have a little bit of that user perspective. And I want you to think about yourself for a second and how you interact with things, and how frustrated you get sometimes when a tool you're using isn't necessarily doing the thing you want it to do the way you want to do it. Congratulations. You now have a user experience. Hold that little nugget in your heart when you're writing your own code. Because the other thing I want you to remember is that your users are not like you. So this is a quote from Matthew Iglesias. It's one of my favorite ones. I used to do politics for a long time. And he keeps a Post-it note on his desk when he writes his columns about policy and politics and government and all that stuff, to remind himself that the median voter is a 50-year-old in America, is a 50-year-old white person who didn't go to college. And why is that up there? It's because he needs to keep in mind that his audience and the voters and the people who are making the decisions aren't like him. He needs to try to put himself in that mindset. In a similar fashion, we do not know who our Postgres users are. And this is a big deal, guys. This is a blind spot. Timescale, to their credit, has tried to address this, right? They have a survey out there. You can read it. It's pretty great. Their state of Postgres users. That particular survey had 888 respondents. Now, I am a government major. I am not good at math. I don't know statistics. But I am acutely aware that 888 is not a statistically significant sample of database users. The estimated number of Oracle users in the world is 70 million. Even if Postgres is some sub-fraction of that, 888 is not a significant thing. We don't know who our users are. So we can't assume they're like us. Keep that in mind. But your users need what you're building. Again, that's why we went back to that concept of the user being like an illegal drug consumer. They need this software. It's critical to what they're doing. It's critical to their job. It's critical to profitability. It's critical to operations. It might be critical to national security. And your support team needs your participation and attention, because that will help them understand where were you coming from and why. And so my suggestion to everyone in this room is give it a try for a week. I promise your support team will say yes. But take a week, field tickets, answer calls, get a feel for that experience that you're putting your support organization through, get a feel for that experience you're putting your users through. You'll be a better coder for the end of it. And the other thing I want you to take away here as we start to get to Q&A and wrap up is we don't know a lot about our users, but you know some things about your users. There is not a person in this room who does not have some influence over the structure of the team you're on. Even if you're an independent contributor, you can go to your manager and make suggestions about your team. So you can build a team, help build a team, help influence a team that looks like your user community, and that will make you stronger. Make it a priority to add teammates that look like your users, because your team probably doesn't look like your users right now. Basic statistics. In America, right now, 37% of people who graduate with science and engineering degrees are Hispanic, Black, or American Indian. 37%. And 16% of doctoral degrees were granted to folks of that heritage. And that's from the US National Science Foundation. 35% of all the employees in STEM were women in 2021. 35%. In 2023, more than 1 in 4 STEM degrees were awarded to women. So just using that as a statistic, think about your team. Is your team a quarter women? Is your team a quarter not white people? If not, is your team reflective of your user community? Quiet's uncomfortable, right? How comfortable is it for your users? And the other side of this, and this is really important, is that there is a lot of science behind a variety of perspectives creating better solutions. This is from the Kellogg School of Business at Northwestern. It is the only citation in my entire presentation. This is a exercise they ran to try to get at a right answer when it was really important. And the exercise they ran was trying to find a murderer. Real life and death simulated stuff. And the fact is that the more diverse the team was in trying to get to who was the murderer in that scenario, the more likely it was that they got the right answer in the end. And that's outstanding. But it is equally true that all those diverse teams who came up with the right answer were less confident that they had the right answer. There was less certainty. The less diverse teams were hyper confident that they'd given the right answer, even when they're wrong. And what goes around comes around, folks. What else do we know today that's going on in the world that's super duper confident that it's right even when it's wrong? Sound like AI hallucination to anyone here? Confidence isn't necessarily a sign of correctness. So, just want to close. Please think of your users when you're writing code, because that's what it's for. My dog Ruby will thank you. So we have time, so I'm going to do my CODA slide about AI, because it's come up a lot, and I felt remiss if I didn't put it in here. One of the ways that AI could interact with your support team and you is AI can be a user. This has already started happening to us, where we're getting tickets, and the tickets are, hey, the internet told me to try this. And it was definitely ChatGPT who gave them a really, really bad idea about deleting wall, or breaking replication, or not worrying about archiving. That's bad. AI as a developer. Well, we all know that can be used to write code sometimes. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about that. I don't know, but I do know this. My opinion in terms of a best practice for AI, it can make your doc writing better. It can make it clearer. It can make it more understandable. It needs to be well trained, but declarative statements and short statements are really, really good, but they can be very, very hard to do when you have complicated concepts to explain. It can be very useful there. It's also a great way of testing your assumptions, right? If you think a thing is going to work one way, go into ChatGPT and ask a question that you expect the answer from ChatGPT to be the way you think it's going to work. And the answer that's coming back is not going to be the way you think it's going to work necessarily, but that's the answer your customers will get. So now you need to solve for that case. It's a great iterative testing tool in that regard. And I'm going to close just by saying thank you. I want to thank Melanie. I want to thank Jonathan. I want to thank Steve. I want to thank every single person on the Postgresql team. This has been a tremendous, tremendous experience for me. This is a great conference. If you need to find me, I'm at Crunchy Data. I'm on LinkedIn. I'll be around for a little bit. And those are some lessons from the support desk I hope you'll take away this morning. Questions?
I think sometimes you might need to also put your question, flip it around, right?
Okay.
Meaning, unless you're also considering support desk a user. Only because I find a lot of times that developers don't necessarily consider how the actual subsystem works. Coding, right?
Yep.
So I think that also might be relevant to try to get people to think differently about, is to, think through that side of thing rather than support desk ally.
Oh, yeah. There's any number of steps between you and the support desk that are important. Absolutely. I'm just, where I sit, I can only see what I can see, and where I sit's on that support desk.
Yeah, I'm on that side too. It's just that, and I think what frustrates me is a lot of times the support desk says you should do X, Y, Z, and people won't implement it, right?
Oh, well. So if this were lessons for support team members, that would be a different presentation. And I can write that one too, talking about meeting customers where they're at and language and things like that. But so you asked me a question, so you get a sticker.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you. And I think some folks over here, you were pretty active and responsive, so you get a sticker. Who else spoke up here? Yeah, thank you. Anybody else speak up, want a sticker?
I'll make a comment.
Yeah, Joe.
You were talking about automation earlier. One thing to keep in mind from personal experience, even though what can happen when you automate something is people forget how to do it manually. And then when it breaks, no one knows how to fix it. So highly recommend that even if you automate something, you have the documentation for how to do it manually, like handy and tested.
Just one.
Totally agree. And have someone on your team try it manually at least once every couple of months.
Someone else besides
Yes.
the person who wrote it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you always want to have at least 2 people on your team knowing how to do things. That way people can go on vacation. Seriously, it's really important. Anybody else have anything they want to say or comment? And Joe, thank you for that. That was awesome. Appreciate it. You want a sticker? You get a golf sticker.
All right.
Thank you to all my Crunchy Data colleagues who came to support me in this. I haven't given a presentation in like 10 years, so I had a little anxiety. And thank you to Chris for doing all the AV. Round of applause for Chris and all the AV team.
News for you, Evan. The Crunchy Data marketing team thinks you should do more presentations.
Crap. All right, I'm going back to my cave to do support, guys. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.